We often say, time is running out, but the truth is more subtle and more dangerous. Time isn't slipping through our fingers because it's scarce, it's slipping away because we're letting it. We wake up, check our phones, fall into routines that weren't chosen but inherited, and convince ourselves we'll start truly living soon. But soon is a myth. Most people don't waste time because they don't care. They waste it because they've never stopped to ask themselves what matters. We've confused being busy with being alive. Meetings, emails, errands, scrolling, replying, consuming. So much of it feels necessary, but is any of it meaningful? We fill our days with obligations that look like progress but deliver no fulfillment. This isn't how we were meant to spend our lives. We weren't born to answer inboxes or keep up with trends. But without clarity on what matters, we become excellent at doing things that don't. There's a strange comfort in distraction. It keeps us from confronting deeper questions. Why am I here? What am I building? What legacy will I leave? These are uncomfortable questions because they demand real choices. So we numb ourselves with noise, with entertainment that doesn't entertain us, with news that doesn't inform us, and with conversations that don't grow us. It's easier to scroll than to reflect, but that ease comes at a cost, our purpose. If we don't decide what matters, someone else will. Companies want our attention. Algorithms want our engagement. People want our approval. And all of them are very good at getting what they want. Every time we say yes to them without thinking, we say no to something in ourselves. Our dreams, our growth, our quiet wisdom, they get crowded out by the louder demands of a world that profits from our distraction. Think of the moments when you felt most alive. They were probably simple, real conversation, deep focus, creating something that didn't exist before, helping someone without needing credit. These are the experiences that expand time, not in quantity, but in quality. They don't just pass the hours, they stretch your soul. And yet, we often treat these moments as luxuries, not priorities. We don't lose time all at once. We lose it in small increments. 5 minutes here, a distraction there, a week of indecision, a year of not trying. We look up and wonder where it all went. But the truth is, we gave it away, one small unconscious choice at a time. Wasted time doesn't always feel wasted in the moment. That's what makes it so dangerous. It feels comfortable, familiar, harmless. And what's even more deceptive is that we justify this waste with the idea of rest. But rest without intention isn't rest. It's escape. There's a difference between recharging and retreating. One fills you, the other hides you. Most of us aren't tired from doing too much. We're tired from doing too little of what matters. And the exhaustion of a meaningless life is far heavier than the fatigue of an intentional one. We talk about time as if it's the enemy, but time is neutral. It's the mirror. It reflects whatever we put into it. If we fill it with noise, we get chaos. If we fill it, meaning we get momentum. Time doesn't care what you do, but you should, because you don't get more of it. You only get to choose what fills it. We live in a world where distraction is leisure. We tell ourselves we're just unwinding or taking a break, but often we're just escaping. There's a difference between rest and avoidance, and most of us don't know where the line is anymore. We scroll, swipe, binge, refresh, not because we're interested, but because we're avoiding silence. And in that silence is where the hard truths live. The truths about who we are, what we're not doing, and what we're afraid to face. Entertainment used to be something intentional. A movie night, a great book, a shared laugh. It had boundaries and it had value. Now, it bleeds into every crack of our day. We don't choose it. It chooses us. We don't even realize time we spend being entertained without ever feeling joy. That's because most of what we consume isn't feeding us. It's numbing us. It's not pleasure, it's sedation. Avoidance is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It's the reflex to check your phone when you feel bored. The decision to start another episode instead of sitting with your thoughts. The way you avoid starting something meaningful by convincing yourself you need just 5 more minutes of nothing. We avoid discomfort, but in doing so, we avoid growth. We avoid failure, but we also avoid progress. We avoid judgment, but we miss the chance to become someone worth knowing. We've made distraction the default, not the exception. And the more we normalize it, the harder it is to detect. It becomes baked into our culture, our work, our relationships, our routines. We mistake constant input for connection. We think being online is being engaged. But much of what we call connection is just consumption in disguise. We're not present. We're preoccupied. Distraction thrives on unfinished business. It preys on the parts of our lives we don't want to look at, the dreams we've shelved, the conversations we've avoided, the truths we've buried. It gives us an easy out, a way to say, I'll deal with it later. But later doesn't come. Later becomes next week, next year, never. And all the while, the things that truly matter atrophy from neglect. There's nothing inherently wrong with entertainment. The issue is when it becomes a full-time shield. When we reach for it, not out of enjoyment, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of missing out on the noise, even when the noise has nothing to offer us. This isn't rest. It's delay. We're not recharging. We're postponing responsibility under the illusion of leisure. We need to be honest with ourselves about the cost. Every time we give in to distraction, we're choosing to push purpose further away. We're saying that comfort now matters more than fulfillment later. That safety from discomfort is worth more than the courage to act. These are decisions we make dozens of times a day without thinking. But each one stacks up, shaping a life we never really meant to build. There's a reason we feel anxious even after hours of so-called downtime. It's because deep down, we know we're not feeding the parts of ourselves that need it most. We're quieting the noise outside while amplifying the unrest within. Distraction promises peace but delivers emptiness. And the longer we use it to avoid ourselves, the more distant we become from the life we're capable of creating. We live in a culture that rewards the word yes. Say yes to every opportunity, every request, every invitation. And you'll be seen as driven, generous, reliable. But what we rarely ask is at what cost. Every yes spends a piece of your energy, your attention, your limited time. And not all yeses are created equal. Some build you, some bury you. The problem isn't generosity, it's defaulting to it without discernment. Most people say yes out of fear, not intention. Fear of disappointing others, fear of missing out, fear of appearing selfish or ungrateful. But when you say yes from fear, you don't just overcommit, you override your own boundaries. You send yourself a subtle message that everyone else's priorities matter more than yours. And over time, that message sinks in until you begin to believe it. We often think we're being kind by saying yes. But kindness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. When you constantly prioritize others without checking in with yourself, you begin to vanish, your goals blur. Your clarity fades. You become reactive instead of intentional. You move through your days putting out everyone else's fires, while your own passions quietly burn out from neglect. There's a hidden arrogance in thinking you're the only one who can hold everything together. It's the belief that if you don't say yes, everything will fall apart. But people learn how to treat us based on what we tolerate. If you always say yes, even when it hurts you, you teach others that your time is flexible and your needs are optional. And that's not their fault. It's your pattern. Every yes is also a no. When you agree to a meeting you don't need to be in, you say no to focused work. When you accept an invitation you don't want to attend, you say no to rest. When you agree to help someone with a project that doesn't align with your vision, you say no to your own mission. These aren't just trade-offs. They're compromises that chip away at your direction, one obligation at a time. Saying yes to everything creates a life filled with activity but absent of alignment. You're always in motion but rarely in control. You're busy but not fulfilled, productive but not purposeful. The worst part is, from the outside, everything looks fine. People admire your hustle, they praise your commitment, but they don't see the exhaustion beneath the surface, the slow erosion of your sense of self. It's hard to say no because it feels final. It feels like rejection, like failure, like closing a door. But the truth is, every no is a doorway to something else. Something more focused, more yours. Saying no is not about being difficult. It's about being deliberate. It's not about shutting people out. It's about protecting what matters most. And the people who respect you will understand that. The ones who don't were never really listening. When you reclaim your no, you reclaim your time. And when you reclaim your time, you begin to hear your own voice again. It's the voice that remembers why you started. The voice that isn't drowned out by no's or guilt or pressure. The voice that knows where you're meant to go and what you must protect to get there. Saying yes to everyone is easy. Saying yes to yourself, that takes courage. There's something deeply human about wanting to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be valued. But somewhere along the way, many of us begin to confuse validation with direction. We start making choices not based on what aligns with our purpose, but on what will earn us applause. We edit ourselves to fit expectations we didn't create. And slowly, we become performers in a life we were meant to lead. The most dangerous thing about chasing approval is that it often works. People like the curated version of you. They reward the version that fits their mold, not your mission. And every compliment you get for being who they want reinforces the distance from who you really are. External validation feels good, not owned. And the moment it disappears, you're left wondering who you are without it. We look for validation in places that were never meant to give it. Social media, peer groups, casual acquaintances, even strangers online. These people don't know your story, your struggle, your vision. But somehow their opinions carry weight. We hand over the authority of our self-worth to people who have no context for our calling. And in doing so, we silence the voice within that actually does. Purpose doesn't need permission. But the more you seek approval, the more you hesitate. You begin second-guessing your instincts. You hold back bold ideas because they might not land well. You shrink ambition to fit comfort zones that weren't designed for you. This isn't humility, it's fear wearing a polite face. And the tragedy is, most of the people whose approval you seek won't even remember your hesitation. You weren't born to be understood by everyone. Your path is specific. Your purpose is particular. It won't make sense to most people because it wasn't given them. It was given to you. And yet, we spend so much time trying to explain, justify, and defend decisions to people who aren't even qualified to wade in. If someone doesn't know your why, their opinion of your how, is irrelevant. There's a cost to this kind of validation seeking. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. The project you never started, the move you never made, the truth you never spoke. All because you were waiting for a green light that was never coming, because you wanted to be sure before you were seen. But the irony is no one sees you clearly until you do. It takes courage to act without applause, to build quietly, to choose alignment over attention. But that's where the real growth lies, in the decisions you make when no one is cheering. Validation is loud, but purpose is quiet. And if you're always tuned into the noise of the crowd, you'll miss the stillness where clarity speaks. The deeper truth is, most of the time, the people whose approval you crave are too busy chasing their own. When you let go of needing to be understood, you free yourself to be honest. Honest in your work, your voice, your relationships, your boundaries. And that honesty creates something stronger than validation. It builds integrity. And integrity doesn't fluctuate with opinion. It doesn't need applause to keep moving. It doesn't bend to be liked. It stands, not because it's popular, but because it's true. We're taught to aim high, to pursue excellence, to give our best. But somewhere along the line, excellence quietly gets replaced with perfection. And perfection, unlike excellence, doesn't move you forward. It holds you hostage. It tells you not to begin until everything is figured out. It convinces you that mistakes are failure, that imperfections are weakness, and that anything less than flawless isn't worth doing at all. The most powerful dreams die in the waiting room of almost ready. You tell yourself you'll launch the idea when it's refined, speak up when you're confident, start creating when the conditions are perfect. But that moment rarely comes. Because perfection isn't a goal, it's a moving target. No matter how far you go, it shifts just out of reach, demanding more, offering nothing. Perfection pretends to protect you. It tells you that waiting makes you wise, that polishing makes you professional, that hesitation is caution. But underneath that surface is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. Perfection doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you stuck. You're not protecting your work. You're hiding from the discomfort of being seen in progress. Starting is vulnerable. It exposes your rough edges, your unfinished thoughts, your early drafts. But that exposure is where the magic begins. No one masters anything in the shadows. Every great artist, leader, thinker began with something raw. They didn't wait to be perfect. They moved anyway. And through motion, they improved. Perfection tells you to delay until you're certain. Progress tells you to begin so you can become certain. The truth is, you can't improve what you don't start. You can't edit a blank page. You can't adjust a voice you haven't used. You can't refine a vision that lives only in your mind. The path to clarity, skill, confidence. It all begins with action, not perfect action, just action. It's the decision to step forward, even when you're unsure, that separates the doers from the dreamers. We often look at others who've built something remarkable and assume they knew what they were doing from the beginning. But they didn't. They learned as they went. They failed publicly. They stumbled, adjusted, and kept showing up. What they did have wasn't perfection, it was permission. They gave themselves permission to begin messy, to learn in real time, to be seen before they felt ready. Perfectionism often wears the mask of high standards, but it's usually a form of control. It's the belief that if you can just make it flawless, you can avoid criticism, pain, rejection. But that control is an illusion. People will misunderstand you no matter how polished your work is. Mistakes will happen no matter how carefully you plan. And chasing perfection often means delaying the very impact you were meant to make. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You need to be real. You need to be honest enough to say, this isn't finished, but it's true. You need to trust that growth happens in motion, not in stillness. And you need to understand that waiting until you're ready is just another way of staying hidden. Starting is what makes you ready. Starting is what reveals your strength. Starting is what makes the next step possible. Fear rarely shows up wearing its true face. It doesn't announce itself as panic or dread. More often, it disguises itself in language that sounds reasonable, even wise. Now's not the right time. Be realistic. Play it safe. These aren't just phrases, they're fear and camouflage. And because they sound practical, we accept them without question, never realizing we've just handed over the steering wheel to hesitation. We call it being responsible, but sometimes it's just being afraid. We tell ourselves we're waiting until we've saved enough, learned enough, planned enough, but enough keeps moving, doesn't it? The bar shifts higher the closer you get to it. And while you wait for the perfect alignment of conditions, time moves on, ideas age, energy fades, opportunities expire. Practicality becomes the prison where ambition goes to sleep. Fear disguised as caution is persuasive. It tells you you're being smart. It tells you other people will understand. It tells you you're protecting your future. But it never tells you what you're giving up in the present. The book you never write, the business you never start, the risk you never take. Fear won't stop you with a shout. It will stop you with a whisper that sounds like wisdom. Many of the limits we live by weren't chosen. They were inherited, passed down by people who settled early, who called their fear maturity, who warned us not to dream too big. And because we respect them, we internalize their restraint. We live inside their ceiling. But their story isn't ours. Their risk isn't ours. Their regrets don't have to be ours. Practicality isn't always wrong, but it should never be the default. There's a version of practicality that's just procrastination with better branding. It tells you to wait just a little longer, to gather a bit more information. To every minute you spend is a declaration, a silent ballot cast for the kind of life you're choosing to live. Whether you're aware of it or not, how you use your time reflects what you value, what you tolerate, and what you're moving toward or away from. Time isn't just passing, it's being invested. And that investment is shaping your direction, your identity, and your future. Most people don't waste time intentionally. They just stop noticing where it's going. They give it away in small pieces. 5 minutes of scrolling here, another yes, to something they don't care about there. No big deal, they think. But hours turn into days, and days turn into patterns. Before long, they're living a life that feels busy but empty. That's not an accident. That's a voting record. Every choice of where to place your attention is a signal to yourself. Work over rest. That's a vote. Distraction over focus, another vote. Time with people who drain you over people who lift you, yet another vote. These choices compound. And over time, they shape not only what your life looks like, but how you feel within it. You don't just get what you want in life, you get what you consistently vote for. Many people say they want clarity, purpose, success, freedom. But their time tells a different story. You can say you value growth, but if your time goes to comfort, you're voting for stagnation. You can say you want depth in your relationships, but if you never unplug, you're voting for distance. The contradiction between what we say we want and how we actually spend our time is where frustration breeds. We tend to believe that change requires some dramatic event, a breakthrough, a new opportunity, a big moment. But change is actually subtle. It begins with a shift in attention, a reallocation of time, a new rhythm to your days. When you start treating time as a finite currency, you become more intentional with how you spend it. You stop living by default and start living by design. Look at your calendar, your habits, your routines. They're your real values in action. They don't lie. They show you what matters, what's neglected, and what's slowly being built. If you're not proud of the direction your time is taking you, the solution isn't guilt. It's honesty. You have to ask yourself, am I voting for the life I actually want? Or just the one that feels familiar? The hardest part isn't managing time. It's facing what your current time management reveals. Because once you see the disconnect between what you say you want and what your actions support, you can't unsee it. You either step into alignment or you continue casting votes for a version of your life that doesn't fulfill you. That decision happens not in theory, but in the next hour, the next day, the next routine. Every hour you spend is a seed planted. Some grow into things you're proud of. Others grow into regret. But either way, something is growing. Time is never neutral. It's always building something. The only question is whether it's building the life you want or the one you'll later wish you had chosen differently. We talk a lot about wanting more time, more hours in the day, more space in the schedule, more room to breathe. But the truth is, we don't need more time. We need to do more with the time we already have. Most people aren't overwhelmed because their calendar is too full. They're overwhelmed because what fills their calendar doesn't fulfill them. It's not a scheduling problem, it's a meaning problem. Time without meaning is just motion. You can move all day. Go to meetings, reply to emails, run errands, keep busy, and still feel empty when the day ends. That's because activity isn't the same as purpose. We confuse the two because our culture rewards productivity over presence. But you can check off 100 tasks and still not feel like you lived. You can be efficient and still feel completely unaligned. We assume the solution to burnout is less work, but burnout often doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing too little of what matters. When your time is spent on things that lack purpose, everything feels heavier. You feel tired faster. You resent your responsibilities. You start to wonder what the point is. But the moment your actions connect to something deeper, your energy shifts. Purpose renews you in a way rest alone never can. People chase time the way they chase money, always believing that more of it will finally bring freedom. But more time won't help if you're still unclear about what to fill it with. If you don't know what you value, free time becomes wasted time. It turns into distraction, procrastination, avoidance. You don't need more hours. You need clearer intention for the hours you already have. Meaning doesn't happen by accident. It requires asking uncomfortable questions. Why am I doing this? Who is it for? What am I moving toward? Most people avoid those questions because they're inconvenient. They slow things down. But speed without direction is chaos. Purpose requires pause. It requires noticing which parts of your life light you up and which ones leave you numb. When we start to orient our time around meaning, everything shifts. Small moments gain weight. A conversation becomes sacred. A project becomes personal. Even the mundane begins to carry significance when it's connected to something larger than yourself. Meaning doesn't demand you change your whole life overnight. It asks that you pay attention to how you're living today. We're told to manage time like a resource. But time isn't just something to spend. It's something to inhabit. You don't experience time in hours and minutes. You experience it in presence and memory. The days you remember aren't the ones where you got the most done. They're the ones where you felt the most alive. Meaning makes time memorable. It gives it texture, depth, story. When you begin choosing meaning over more, life simplifies. The noise fades. The urgency softens. You stop running toward the next thing and start investing in the right thing. You're not trying to stretch your time. You're filling it with something that actually matters. Because in the end, it's not about how much time you had. It's about what that time became.